Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be bringing you this video. This is going to be an exact step-by-step breakdown of how I'm able to get my clients to transform their physiques consistently and maintain the results. We're going to go through some of the results of my clients and the exact process that we use to get there. This will probably be very valuable for you if your goals are to lose fat, build muscle, tone up, build strength, build fitness. If any of those things sound like your goals, then you'll probably take something of value out of this video. A lot of the questions I would get about losing weight, building muscle, whatever it is, to actually answer these questions without leaving any gaps, I really need to get into the details and the process of doing it. So I'm going to run through the things that you need to learn, the order that you need to learn them in, the tasks that you should be doing each day, so that when you action everything in this video, you are able to actually see some results and not just listen to the video, walk away from it with nothing. So let's get right into it. The exact step-by-step process I use to transform my client's physique consistently. Hopefully by the end of this video, what you should learn is the exact step-by-step process I use to get massive results for my clients. How to lose fat consistently and sustainably. How to build muscle and strength consistently and sustainably. How to tone, how to maintain results, where to start, and what steps to take in between. Just so you know that this works, this process transformed Ace physique in a matter of 12 months. As you can see here, he put on a ton of muscle, lost a ton of fat, and he's still making progress to this day. You know, Abe is still repeating this process that he's learned and building more muscle, getting in better shape, and maintaining his results. So there are really 3 areas that you need to work on in order to build your goal physique, get stronger, and feel healthier. And there's nutrition, training, and accountability. Accountability is here because it really just helps us do the first 2, training and nutrition, and learn what we need to know. So the reason most strategies rarely work is because some, if not all of these areas, are usually incomplete or skipped altogether. What happens is we achieve these results that are borrowed, I like to say. So we might actually lose some weight or build some muscle, but we tend to go back to where we started, and I'm sure many of you can relate to that. So the key to long-term sustainable results, which is the key thing here, your current results are pretty much in line with your current knowledge, habits, and actions. So where you are at today is in line with those 3 things. So and for the most part, the weak link of all 3 of those things will determine what kind of progress you see. And I'm going to give you an example using myself when I was about 5 years into training. Okay, I was training, for reference, about 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7 times a week. And again, this is just some rough ratings, but you'll get the idea. So I would rate my knowledge back then a 3 out of 10. Knowledge around training and nutrition. My habits were probably a 4 out of 10. Had some poor eating habits and sleeping habits. And I'd say my action was about a 7 out of 10. And I say this because I didn't miss any workouts. I trained consistently and so on. There is one more thing that does play a part. Genetics does play a part, but it's something that we can't control, so I don't bother talking about it. I can't teach you how to have better genetics. So my knowledge and habits were the weakest link out of these 3 things. Despite me rating my action a 7 out of 10, it wasn't quite enough. So I wasn't seeing results. That is because my action was there, but it was not in the right direction because I didn't know where to put my energy, which is what led to, I say, a 3 out of 10 results, but I really was just spinning my wheels and going in circles and actually getting nowhere, despite putting 5, 6 hours, 7 hours in the gym a week. Now, if you're still here, you're probably likely ready for huge results that you can maintain, and I think that's the biggest part, and also continue to make for the rest of your training career. And I'm pretty much going to run you through how I address each of these things and pretty much the actual process I take my clients through to get there. So it's split up into 3 phases. The first phase is our foundation that we work on. So I'll break down pretty much where to start and every step that you will need to get through to develop a rock solid foundation, which is essential for long-term results. It's pretty much the key for keeping your progress. So transforming your physique requires a high degree of control over the nutrients you consume, as well as training and recovery. Don't start on your fitness journey by cutting carbs, doing tons of cardio, eating 1,300 calories, which is something I see often. This is like skydiving without a parachute. It doesn't end well. This is because without a structure, a diet becomes ridiculously hard to manage and often ends up failing. And this is where a lot of the issues come in. So successfully building muscle and losing fat and strength, building strength needs a strong foundation. It's incredibly difficult to control and manipulate your training and nutrition in your favor if it's sporadic. I said that we need a high degree of control of those things, but if things are random, that is literally the opposite of what we want. So to lose weight, we need to decrease calories. I'm sure you've heard this before, and create a calorie deficit, which is much harder than necessary when meal frequency, calorie intake, and food options are random. And this is why we need a good structure and foundation. So I'm going to give you your first actionable advice in case that just sounds like mumbo jumbo. So you need to develop this is the things that you actually need to be able to do if you want to, 1, get results, and 2, keep the results. You want to develop a repeatable eating routine that aligns with your lifestyle, aiming for, I'd say, about 3 to 5 meals each day. Again, this is just a vague recommendation based on what is most practical and preferable for you, not what some Instagram influencer told you to do. The next thing is aiming to keep about a fist-sized serving of lean protein in most meals. The next thing is setting a rough cap to take out, especially in the early days of this process, because knowledge isn't quite where you want it to be and your understanding of nutrition. So I like to cap takeout in the early days, maybe twice a week, or just like a 70% decrease is probably like the most you would get away with, depending on the person. I won't give specifics on that. And the last thing is to aim for a minimum of 7 hours sleep a night so that we're recovering. Once you get good at those 4 things, you can then focus on what am I eating? How can I improve that? But this is often skipped. So make sure you're eating 3 to 5 meals a day. Make sure there's protein in most of those meals. Cap your takeout and make sure you're getting enough sleep. Sounds super basic. Once these habits are in place, and this might take you 2 weeks, it might take you 4 weeks, it might take you 6 weeks. Once these habits are in place, you can improve meals further by eating at least 2 serves of veggies a day, around 2 serves of fruit each day, a palm-sized serve of carbohydrates in each meal. So then if you do all of these things, by this point, your diet should look like 3 to 5 meals rich in protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables. I didn't mention anything on fats. Many of the foods labeled as, or that we know as carbs or protein also contain some fats, along with other things like cooking oil, sauces, and so on. Just some general advice with fat. 1, it can add up, which is why I don't really give you a specific target just yet. And some general advice is aim to get your fat intake from things that are typically labeled as healthy fats, just for now. Fats are often overconsumed a majority of the time from what I've observed. So just moderating those is probably a good start. What I've covered is really all you need to get good at for the first 6 to 8 weeks, or until it feels automatic, feels like a habit. Everything like I've just outlined right now sounds super simple, super basic, yet most people don't do it. And this is the sole reason why they can sometimes get results but never keep them, because there is no foundation behind them. So most people struggling to see results don't do this. But would it sound too basic if I told you most of my clients will reach what they deem to be their fitness goals from just doing this? Like sometimes we don't go any further than this. And my client Iram is a great example of this. She didn't even gain or lose any weight between these photos, but she built muscle, toned up, lost fat, and so on. So this is just via improving those basic eating habits. And for most people, they will get very far just doing that. And it's not super invasive either. Like this is very achievable for most people. So by this point, if you've taken on all of the things that I suggested, all of that actionable advice, I'm going to zoom in here. Hopefully it doesn't mess anything up. This is roughly, and again I say roughly because it's not a hard rule, but it's a guideline, how your meals could or should look like. So if you're aiming for about 3 serves of, say 2 or 3 serves of veg a day, 3 to 4 serves of protein a day, 4 to 5 serves of carbs a day, and I didn't mention fats, but this is what they would look like on your plate as serves, and this is what it would look like as actual food. So three large meals, or 3 reasonable sized meals, all with protein in them. Snacks, rich in carbohydrates, rich in protein. And by this point, this is where you should be at. And if you're really good at this, you're going to see massive results. I haven't mentioned training yet. So next up we have training. Let's get into that. And I'm going to keep it fairly basic. So the reason why resistance training is important. So resistance training is key for better results during this process because you will build more muscle, which leads to more lean body mass, and it makes your physique look more toned. Resistance training and being generally active as well can really help with regulating appetite. And you can see this in Irem's case up here. So with that being said, regular training does not mean 6 to 7 times a week. That is probably overkill for 99% of people. And nearly 80% of everyone I've ever coached until now has trained between 3 to 4 times a week. Maybe the other 20% have trained 5 or 2 times a week. I don't think I've had anyone do 6, 7 times a week. So step 1, pick a number of sessions that complements your lifestyle, not what someone's told you to do. Think about how much time you currently have available and what you feel confident actually doing this week, today, the best program is ultimately the one that you stick to. So 4 days and 5 days are not better if you can't stick to them. So now I'm going to go over how to have more consistent and productive training. Because if we want to train 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, we need to figure out how to make this easier. So, and more productive. So firstly, prioritize resistance training. Pretty much train like a bodybuilder for the most part. That's a bit vague, but essentially spend most of your time in the gym lifting weights within a 5 and 20 rep range, let's say. I'm not going to go too much into that. Routine is your ally. Try to train at the same time, the same sessions on the same days, and treat these sessions like doctor's appointments or whatever kind of appointment. Put them in your schedule and keep them in the same spot as much as you can. This is going to really help things feel automatic and help you train on autopilot. Another thing that needs to be addressed for you to train consistently. So stop saying shit like, I'm too busy, I don't have time, it's impossible for me to lose weight, I'm a hard gainer, I have horrible genetics, and so on. Although there can be some truth to a lot of this stuff, surrendering to our disadvantages gets us nowhere. For example, a time constraint like I don't have time can be solved fairly quickly if you're willing to accept that it's solvable. But first you need to do that. Otherwise you don't even start to problem solve and work out how to make it work. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're someone who actually does have a very little amount of time, but you're willing to work it out and you don't just surrender to that concept or that label. You could buy some training equipment for home. You could cut down on time spent on social media. You could train 2 or 3 times a week at home, maybe for 30 or 40 minutes. Even some of the busiest people on the planet could manage this. So it's not that you have a time constraint or you don't have time. It's that you just don't yet know how to work around the constraint or the hurdle of poor time available to train. And that's something that you can work out and figure out. Like all of these things. If you're a hard gainer, there's ways to gain weight. I have horrible genetics is probably the only one that we can't solve for, but there are things that you can do to see progress. So this is like just one example how most of these labels are solvable. The real issue is that you never actually give yourself the opportunity to figure it out. if you don't accept that it is in your control. The next thing, and I say these things because I see them all the time in the early days when people start up, and this is some of the stuff that we address right away. Perfection is the enemy and persistence is your friend. If you're going to give this a go, you will probably miss some training sessions. You might have to cut some sessions short. You might even have some days where you're too lazy to go to the gym. You might skip a session. It happens. But persisting, continuing to try, continuing to learn, continuing to give it your best, despite these things happening, will allow you to get better at the skill of training consistently, because it is a skill that you get better at, and when you get good enough at it, it becomes automatic. Perfection is really just not necessary, and the idea of trying to be perfect leads to worse results in the long run. So many people have this all or nothing mindset, and it is the actual thing that stops them from getting results. If they don't hit their target of how many days a week they want to train, they throw in the towel. If they don't eat how they want to over the weekend, they throw in the towel. If they don't see progress in the first 4 weeks, they throw in the towel. But really, if you just allow yourself to experience those, failures and learn from them, and then use the things that you learn to overcome them the next time, you will make results, and you will see results in the long term. This is why I've set such basic targets for 6 to 8 weeks, because you need to fail through that period of time. You need to make mistakes and figure out how to overcome them until it becomes automatic. Number 5, to train with a friend or a family member or a gym partner, and that's quite self-explanatory. Number 6, make the gym fun. Wear some maybe new gym clothes, blast your favorite tunes. Make it enjoyable to get to the gym, not a chore, and realize that it's an opportunity that some people don't actually get, and we are lucky to be able to do. We can go to the gym, lift some weights, have some fun, improve our physique. Like it really is a blessing. So got deep there. So that wraps up phase 1. By this point, you should see some pretty massive results. If you've done everything that I've just said, you could stop here and you would honestly be super surprised on what you achieve. Your training by this point should be rock solid and consistent if you've done this for 6 to 8 weeks. And your nutrition foundation, aka excellent eating and training habits, should be fantastic right now. And as a side note, I haven't touched on at all, I haven't mentioned a single thing about tracking calories, fancy exercises, supplements, cardio, or anything like that. Nothing. Because you can just do what I just said and see some crazy results. Trust me. And I'll prove it to you in 1 second. So people often look at these steps because they're too basic or too simple, but more of you would be advanced if you accepted that doing the beginner shit over and over and over again is how you actually make progress and how you actually become advanced. Having this foundation in place allows you to not only achieve the result, it gives you the skill set to maintain the results you make long term. Or you can stick to the typical approach that everyone does, yo-yo diet, and end up right where you started. Most people that lose weight, in fact, like a really high percentage of people that lose weight, I think 90%, regain the weight within a year. Even higher percentage after 2 years, and so on. If you're still not sure that this is the process that you need to go through or it works, here are more results from my clients Andrew and Natalie, and all they did is what I've said so far. This is before they went into the next phases. All they did was improve their eating foundation, eating routine, understanding of nutrition, and trained more consistently. And these are some pretty big results. Nat lost 5 kilos, and that wasn't even our intention. We just wanted to get better at those habits. And Andrew weighs the same in both photos. Again, massive difference. So if you are still here and you just do this, you'll probably be in a great spot. If you want to take it further and get even more results, this is where we would go through phase 2. And this is what I like to call the fundamentals phase. So this is more of the fun part where we can learn how to accelerate results while actually maintaining them. Obviously, it's not without its own unique challenges, just like the first phase. Here's what I want you guys to walk away with after this phase is done. You should have a deep understanding of nutrition, an amazing ability to track calories and macronutrients, training that is optimized for muscle growth, your first real and successful fat loss or muscle building phase, depending on what the goal is and where you're at. And these are the sort of results you can expect to see in a 6 to 8 weeks period when you get excellent at this. Alex Schmitty lost a bunch of weight in an 8-week period. Same with Sienna. And these are results that you're like, how did this guy do it in 6 to 8 weeks? Because they had the knowledge and spent time building that knowledge and foundation and now these new skills that I've just mentioned to be able to get these results in such a rapid way and keep them. So here's the itinerary for our goals for nutrition here. So this is about an 8-week process, phase 2. Week 0, before you start, you need to decide if you will be running a muscle building or fat loss phase, which I'll help you determine. So once you've done that, week 0 to 2, start tracking at least one meal each day on a calorie tracking app like MyFitnessPal and begin reading more food labels for some insight into the nutrients in food. No targets. I haven't said anything about targets. I just want you to track a meal each day and read food labels so you start to understand what is actually in the food I'm consuming. Don't listen to what the app tells you on how much calories to eat or how much macros to eat. Week 3, I want you to start tracking not just one meal, pretty much every meal that you consume, including takeout. It's important to do this without setting or following any targets assigned to you by yourself or the app. Please don't try to follow some kind of calorie target that you've seen some influencer follow or someone on YouTube told you to follow, or Instagram or TikTok, whatever. No targets, just the goal of these first 3 weeks is to get excellent at tracking calories accurately. And the problem with setting targets too early is it influences the way that you track. It takes your attention away from learning about the nutrition in food. And it can just make you more frustrated throughout this process rather than enjoying the learning process. Weeks 4 to 8 is where you will set targets for weight gain or fat loss and smash them. You should now have the skill set to track food accurately, including takeout. So you're going to have to get good at tracking takeout too. And therefore be able to follow targets for a long period of time and lose fat or build muscle throughout this phase. So to determine if you should run a muscle building phase or fat loss phase, you need to consider the following. You should run a muscle building phase if you want to look more toned in the long run, you are not overweight, you want to build more muscle, you want to get stronger, and you want more energy. You might even be one of the lucky ones that run a muscle building phase and actually lose or maintain fat during this process, which is actually probably not as uncommon as most people think from what I've seen with clients. Like, it happens a lot more than I initially expected. So let's say you do run a muscle building phase. These will be your targets. Gaining around 1% of your body weight a month to maximize muscle gain, but also minimize fat gain. That's the first step. So you get 1% of your body weight. I need to gain that per month. Work out how much it is each week. This is usually about a 300 or 500 calorie surplus for most people. You should understand how much that is. By this point, you should know roughly how much you eat a day to maintain your body weight. And then you're going to add 3 to 500 roughly. Protein is going to roughly be 2 grams per kilo of body weight. I say 2 grams because it's just an easy number to remember. It doesn't always need to be this high. Protein contains 4 calories per gram, and they're essential for building muscle and repairing tissue. Fats, this is our first fat target. About 0.8 grams to 1 gram of fat per kilo of body weight. Fats contain 9 calories per gram and are essential for nutrient transport and hormone function. Carbohydrates are going to be assigned by leftover calories. So if you have 1,000 calories, that equates to 250 grams of carbs, because 4 calories is 1 gram of carbs. So you just divide it by 4, and that's how I got that. Just to make your life easier, and you can just use a macro calculator and adjust from there if you need to. Cool? You got your targets, nice and clear. You should run a fat loss phase if your goals are to lean up soon, if you're currently overweight, or it is not practical for you to put on or maintain weight, as in run a muscle building phase. Sitting at maintenance calories can be just as, if not more, productive for some people. Some people are not ready for the weight loss just yet, and continuing to go through the processes that we've outlined up to now can probably actually lead to better results. But this will depend again on the person. So let's say you run a fat loss phase. Here are your targets. And by the way, most of these targets and numbers that I'm giving to you are just a rough guideline. There are plenty of examples where I do not stick to these and where it's not appropriate to stick to these. But I'm going to give you a general place to start. So fat loss targets are around 0.5 to 1% of your body weight lost per week. And I do this to avoid making the dieting phase too lengthy. For example, if you're weighing 70 kilos and you wanted to lose 10 kilos, for example, if you were losing at a slower rate than this, that might end up leading to like 20 weeks of dieting, which is an incredibly long time to diet, which I'm not a fan of, because time spent in a diet is essentially time not maximizing how much muscle you build. So anyway, 0.5 to 1% of body weight lost per week is the objective here. Step target that is a little higher than your usual to start with. Try to add an extra 3,000 or 4,000 steps a day. If this is easy, you can potentially do more, as long as you stay in line with that rate of loss target that I just said, 0.5 to 1% of body weight per week. Keep the diet nutrient rich via fruit, vegetables, and nutrient rich ingredients and foods. When you're in a deficit, when you're losing weight, you are literally restricting energy and nutrition. So you want to make sure that the food that you do consume provides you with as much nutrients that are going to benefit you as possible, or you'll probably feel a lot worse than you have to. And make sure you're getting no less than 7 hours sleep a night. You can use a calorie calculator to work out some targets, or on an app, but by now, if you've gotten to this point, you should have a decent idea of how many calories you consume and need a day to maintain your body weight, which does require you to weigh yourself, so you can adjust from here. In order to lose about 0.5 to 1%, I'm not sure if I made note of this, hopefully I did, but to lose about 1% or 0.5, between 0.5 and 1% of your body weight a week, that, depending on the total amount, that could look like a deficit from anywhere between 500 up to 800 up to 900, it depends. And that can be quite a large deficit for some people. So again, this is where you would probably lean towards the lower half of that range. Anyway, I think using a calorie calculator to do that, a macro calculator, is probably a good start, and it will save you a lot of hassle. Now, they're your nutrient goals. That's all you have to do now, because you've got every other skill required to do this well for the most part. Your phase 2 training goals are this. Each set in the gym should now start to be pushed within 3 reps of failure, not being able to complete another rep, to get the most out of each set. Aim to beat the logbook, which requires a logbook, meaning try to outperform yourself each week, whether that means doing 1 more rep, 1 more kilo. I probably wouldn't add a set every week, but maybe 1 more rep or 1 more kilo, or 1% better technique. High technique quality is really important by this point also. It'll really help you optimize your workouts and get more out of your every single session. This means having a full range of motion where possible, consistent technique so your reps don't look random, and controlled reps so you're not letting the weights move you around. It's the other way around. And the last thing is having designated weeks for recovery, or sometimes days or a few days, but most will say designated recovery weeks for when fatigue starts to build up and affect your training quality. So if training is getting really shit really quickly, you probably just need a chill week of training, and that might mean doing less sets, training less hard, and so on. So pretty much this is like the overview of how to lose fat or gain muscle on paper, which actually shouldn't look like a lot of changes after phase 1. So if you've achieved phase 1, this should not look like a lot of changes beyond maybe just swapping some foods around really and moving a bit more. Or if you're not dieting, that wouldn't be the case. So before getting right into the actual fat loss or muscle building phase, here are some actual obstacles you will face running these phases. And if you can handle these things, you'll probably handle the diet or the muscle building phase really, really well. And yeah, pretty much how to overcome them. So the first thing you will probably experience eventually, or maybe early on, depending on you, is changes to your appetite. The way to overcome this is to manipulate food volume, food palatability, think flavor and taste, and meal frequency. I'm going to explain that now. So food volume is the physical size of your meals. If you're getting hungry, your meals need to get larger in size without getting higher in calories. Say you're dieting. If you're getting really full and you're trying to gain weight and you can't eat the amount of food required, you need to decrease the volume of food while keeping the same amount of calories, if not higher, to continue gaining weight. For example, a spoon of peanut butter is about that big, let's say, and that might be 200 calories. And then a bowl of lettuce and cucumber and tomato with some low-calorie salad dressing on top, maybe this big. And it probably still wouldn't be the same amount of calories as a spoon of peanut butter. So that is what we're talking about when we're talking about food volume, the physical size of the meal and the foods. So food palatability is referring to the flavor and taste and texture of the food. Pretty much, if your appetite is getting worse, you need to make your food more tasty. If you're getting hungrier, you probably need to lean towards slightly more simple and plain and bland foods so that your appetite doesn't get out of control. Meal frequency can be manipulated in the following ways. Higher meal frequency means the size of the meal tends to be smaller, which can be a lot more favorable if you're trying to gain weight, because you're not eating till you're stuffed every meal. On the other hand, if you have a lot of meals, it means that they're not going to be very filling. So this might not be favorable for a diet. And this is where maybe having 3 to 4 larger meals might be suitable for you if you're dieting. This should not get out of hand and this should not get crazy. And if it does, we'll touch on that. The next thing that you'll find hard will be a challenge is consistency. And consistency is essentially a product of preparation. If you're not able to be consistent, you're pretty much just not prepared. Aim to make following the plan as convenient as humanly possible. Do things like prepare your meals ahead of time, organize your training ahead of time. Make it easier to stay on track than it is to not stay on track. For example, let's say you're time poor and you find it really challenging to prepare your meals. You could meal prep, okay, and let's say you can't meal prep. You could have a meal prep company deliver meals to your house. That requires zero effort on your part. And it is more convenient than ordering takeout if you have a meal in front of you, or like a frozen meal that you can just chuck in the microwave, compared to ordering takeout. That is literally staying on track is literally more convenient than not staying on track in that circumstance. So try to engineer your environment in a way that forces you to stay on track. And a good saying that I recently heard was, it is easier to change your environment than it is to change yourself. And this is really where most of your focus should be. If you're not doing something, if you're not consistent in an area, change something about the environment so that you can be consistent more easily without needing to be motivated and things like that. Adjustments. Avoid making changes too fast or too frequently. Before assuming calories aren't low enough if you're dieting or high enough if you're massing, you should troubleshoot in this order. Consistency. Have you been consistent with your meal consumption and hitting your targets? If yes, how accurate is your tracking out of 10? And usually people by these 2 points, like they've already been like, okay, I can address these 2 things first. If you're not consistent, make sure you're consistent before being like, I need to change my calories. And the same thing applies. If your tracking is not that accurate, you're eating meals that you haven't prepared yourself, it's self-explanatory. The next thing is the number of untracked meals you consume. If you're consuming 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 untracked meals a week, cut that down if you're not seeing the progress that you would like. Frequency of takeout, which is actually similar, and it's pretty much a similar principle. So address in that order. If you get through all 4 of those things and you're still not progressing, then what you do is wait about 10 to 14 days without changing a thing before changing anything. And that's if you've troubleshooted each. If you still see no changes, then you can make the appropriate adjustments, whether it's more or less calories. If you do everything right up until now, adjustments to calories and macro targets probably won't happen that often. If they are happening often or required often, that should be a red flag for you that one of those 4 things I just mentioned can be addressed. And this is where your energy needs to go, into the basic stuff once again. So timelines, this is also important. It's important to have a timeline for each phase. Typically, this is how I like to structure each. A muscle building phase, I would go for as long as possible until body fat gets too high. I would probably stop before it gets too high. Appetite gets too low, so you can't eat enough calories, despite changing food volume and trying the things that I've mentioned. Performance stops improving. So they're the things that I would address. If those things haven't happened, keep going, because you'll keep building muscle and you'll keep improving your physique, and you will thank yourself for it in 12 months' time. Ideally, I lean towards a minimum of 4 months of massing, muscle building, however you want to phrase it, all the way up to 10 to 11 months. If someone can get away with it for more, I absolutely do. But this is kind of like the range that I see most people in. Assign a week of dieting, like give yourself a week of dieting for every 4 weeks of building. This doesn't mean do 4 weeks of building and then 1 week of dieting. So you do 4 weeks of building, you earn yourself a week. This is just, again, a rough guideline, so you have some kind of framework for this. So if you did 10 months of building, you would then earn yourself 10 weeks of dieting. And if you look at the math that I've written out, if you're gaining 1% of body weight a month and losing 1% of body weight a week in either phase, you should pretty much start and finish a muscle building followed by a fat loss phase in the same spot, which is typically the sequence that I like to do. Build muscle, as much muscle as possible, you'll gain a bit of fat, and then you diet for that in weeks, and you should finish at the same body weight. So you might have started at 70 kilos, finished at 80 kilos after 10 months, and then gone back down over 10 weeks to 70 kilos. By then, you should see some pretty significant results if you do this really well. And again, I'm going to show you more examples of that. Fat loss phases. Cap a single fat loss phase at about 10% of body weight lost per phase. And at the point that the benefits of the diet start to be outweighed by the costs of the diet. So the ROI of the diet is no longer, when the diet ROI is no longer in your favor, that is a great sign to stop. And the costs of the diet include things like low energy, high hunger, poor mood, low libido, poor sleep, low adherence, decreased training performance, and many more. So there are costs to dieting, which is why I steer people away from it as much as we can get away with. If you experience a lot of these symptoms of diet fatigue, you should take a break from the diet and increase calories at least to maintenance for some period of time. Sometimes a small surplus might be even better. A side note, if you're experiencing this stuff early on in the diet, it's concerning. So at the start of the diet, or for like most of the diet, early days, the effects should be very mild, and they will get more pronounced as it goes on, but you should not be starving in the first 3 weeks of your diet. You should not have horrible energy, mood, libido, all of these things. That's concerning, and that probably means you need a break from dieting. Your diet is too aggressive, aka the deficit you're in is too large, or you're not recovering well from your training, which is where you look at your total workload in the gym and your sleep. Some final notes on that. Run a fat loss phase only when needed, as it's the only time you're unlikely to build any muscle at all or risk losing muscle. So this is why I favor muscle building phases over fat loss phases, as long as we can afford to do that. And that is phase 2. Assuming you do this well, you should now have the ability to lose a significant and controlled amount of weight whenever you want and build a lot of muscle predictably and consistently. Here's some client wins from Emily and Phil, who I worked with a while ago now. They both ran a fat loss phase, and these are the type of results they saw in a fairly quick period of time. Phase 3. And this one is going to be very, very short compared to everything else. So this is what I call the freedom phase. If you've dieted up until this point, you need to firstly recover from the diet. And that might mean sitting at maintenance for a little bit here before starting this. This phase is relatively short, like I said, compared to the first two. By now you should have the skill set to pull this off easily. And this is kind of bringing everything together now. By the end of this phase, you should be able to control your body weight and make progress without needing to track calories on an app, follow a meal plan, be told what to eat pretty much, or rely on external prompts. You should have the knowledge in your head to put on weight, lose weight, whatever you want to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to do this all the time. You should have the expertise to do it. And it enables you to do a lot of things. For example, start to be able to stay on track regardless of where you're at. You know, if you're on holiday, if you're, whatever, if you've got events on, you should be able to navigate most scenarios by this point, because your knowledge and skills will be at a very, very competent, or in a very competent level. So it's pretty easy to start doing this phase. This phase is literally like, you could do this in 2 weeks once you've recovered from phase 2, or if you're massing, you probably don't need to recover. That's where you'll do like a fat loss phase after it, if you did do that, then I wouldn't recommend what I'm about to explain. So this phase is where we'll start working on this by writing down and estimating the calories and macros in a meal before consuming it. So where you would typically track a meal, you'll just write down what you think the calories, protein, carbs, and fats are, and fiber if you want. Then you will track the meal and see how accurate your estimation was. Compare the difference, and what we're going to do is see how close we are. The reason this is useful, this is what I said before. So the reason this is useful is because you'll be able to manage nutrition in a variety of different situations: holidays, takeout, grandparents cooking, parents cooking, anything. And it's not to say that you'll be perfect, but your margin of error will significantly decrease, allowing you to pretty much stay on track forever. If you're consistently able to eyeball a meal without an app within around 10%, then you're probably in a great spot to ditch all the gadgets, at least for now, at least for some period of time. And having the ability to not rely on these things just gives you a lot of freedom, which is the whole point of this phase. If it's not going well, get more practice tracking meals and repeat this process. This is pretty much, actually, before I get into that. So if you're trying this and you're actually not within, say, 10, maybe 15% accurate of the, of how closely you got the tracking correct, you probably just want to repeat those phases, like that phase 1 stuff, or some of that phase 2 stuff where you're practicing tracking calories without targets and things like that until you're good. But if you pulled off a fat loss phase or a muscle building phase really well, and you've been working on this stuff up until this point, you know that last phase should be at least 8 weeks. You should be like, this should be pretty much down pat. You should have the skills to do this by now. This is pretty much the process that I took Alex here through, and I still coach him to this day. And this allowed him to transform his physique in 6 months. There is one thing I will mention, and I'll be very transparent about. Our phase 2 was a lot longer than 8 weeks because it was a muscle building phase, and we did it as long as we could. But we spent a long time doing the things that we need to get good at in phase 2 before the stuff that we need to get good at in phase 3. But essentially, this is the same process, just stretched out in the middle so that we can actually build as much muscle as possible. So photo 1, he was 75 kilograms here. Photo 2, he got up to 80 kilograms 16 weeks later. So we doubled the length of phase 2. So we ran it twice. And then 6 weeks later, he had lost 10 kilograms. And this is how he looked. So this is the process of toning up, building muscle, getting stronger right here. Okay? You'll start not having as much muscle and maybe a bit more body fat than you want. You'll continue by building muscle, maybe having still a little bit more body fat than you want. You can see he did accumulate a bit of body fat here. And you'll finish probably in the best shape of your life. And Alex is still repeating this process. I've now coached him for over a year. And he's going through this process again. So hopefully now you understand how to lose fat, how to build muscle, how to keep the results. And if you do this stuff, it really does work. And now that you understand exactly how this process works, I have an offer for you. So if you are a gym goer or you're about to start your fitness journey and you want to stop going in circles, you want to stop wasting time and effort and not seeing results, and you need to learn a sustainable or want to learn a sustainable approach to seeing results so that you can finally achieve your dream physique, feel stronger and fitter sustainably, I'll personally help you implement our fitness formula framework into your life so we can replicate this exact process for you. That way you can see similar results in less than a quarter of the time it would take you if you were to try to do it on your own, if not less than a quarter, honestly. I'm so confident that we can deliver these results for you that if you don't see massive improvements in your physique, like all of my clients, strength and fitness in the next 112 days using my system, you don't pay. If you want to see similar results like Mina, Odhi, and many of my other clients, again, you can have a quick look, and want help implementing our system to see consistent results that you can actually maintain, hit the link that I'll put in the description of this video and book a call where I can walk you through how the system works, how I can help you. And if we're a good fit, I'll run you through what the next steps would look like and how we would work together. If we're not a good fit, I'll be able to point you in the right direction. That wraps up this video. Looking forward to chatting with you guys. And I really, really hope this was valuable and you finished this video taking some actionable advice and have some understanding of how to actually achieve your fitness goals long term. As always, my DMs are open. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it below or shoot me a message. Thanks, everyone.